Those are the things that we're trying to protect and defend. Those assets that provide critical services to NATO forces here in the Euro-Atlantic theater.
Howdy, and welcome to the Allied Air Power Podcast, NATO's sole broadcast that patrols the full spectrum of air, space, and cyberspace. I'm your host, callsign Houdini. This week, we're blasting off into NATO's newest operational domain, space, the final frontier. Now, my Trekkie did geek out at me during this episode, but it was totally worth it. We're joined by U.S. Colonel Jonathan L. Whitaker, Chief of Staff at NATO's Combined Forces Space Component Command and Director of the NATO Space Operations Center here at Ramstein Air Base, Germany. Colonel Whitaker is NATO Air Command's principal space advisor, and he leads a multinational team driving the Alliance's efforts in space. Together, we'll explore why NATO created the Space Center in 2020 and how it serves as a focal point for Allied space activities, and what it means for a commander in the field to actually request and receive space support. So buckle in. Today, we're going orbital. Today on the Allied Air Power Podcast, we're honored to welcome Colonel Jonathan L. Whitaker, Chief of Staff of NATO's Combined Forces Space Component Command and Director of the NATO Space Operations Center, based right here at Ramstein Air Base in Deutschland. Colonel Whitaker is NATO Air Command's principal space advisor, leading a multinational team of professionals driving the Alliance's operational oversight in the space domain. His career as a space operations officer spans more than 2 decades, from his early days working on the NATO 4 Skynet 4 satellite system to commanding units, advising combatant commanders, and shaping the future of space integration at U.S. Southern Command. With awards that include the Legion of Merit, the Colombian Ad Astra Medal, and recognition as U.S. Strategic Command Space Operator of the Year, Colonel Whitaker brings a wealth of operational, strategic, and international experience. Beyond the uniform, he's also a dedicated husband, and as he told me, a dedicated father of 3, by his own admission, also an enthusiastic but not expert guitar player. Sir, Colonel Whitaker, welcome to the show, and it is a privilege to have you here.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here, and I can't underscore enough how enthusiastic I am about the guitar, but how really just bad I am. But that doesn't stop me from playing in public. I apologize if my voice sounds a little gravelly or scratchy today. It's a little dry yesterday, so if I sound more like Kathleen Turner, I'll just take that as a compliment, but I'll do my best.
No worries, sir. I'm sure you're going to be awesome. Now, to our listeners out there, I got good news. I don't have to do the disclaimer here because everything he says is under the NATO brand. So no pressure, sir.
Thank you.
Well, sir, for our listeners, first question I have for you. For our listeners who are not familiar, could you start by explaining what the NATO Space Center is, why it was created, and what role it plays within Allied Air Command here at Ramstein?
You got it. So let me first say that want to get the brand out there. We're the NATO Space Operations Center, but the NATO Space Operations Center, or INSPOC, is just a small part of what we do. Really, the larger organization, the larger space organization here at NATO is called the Combined Force Space Component Command. And we have all the same responsibilities, believe it or not, of a theater component command, but in this more warfighting compact organization that falls under Allied Air Command. So our boss is the Allied Air Command commander, and we add an additional hat to him as if the other 7 weren't enough, of Commander, Combined Force Space Component Command. And it would have a lot of the same joint doctrinal responsibilities that AirCom or MARCOM or LANDCOM would have, but with a space focus, primarily on orbital defense, and then more broadly on bringing space capabilities and effects and forces to the NATO Joint Force Commander. So we have a really multi-domain operations focus here at the CIFSPIC. Now, you asked about the NATO Space Center. The NATO Space Center is the original name of the activity that after 2019, NATO decided, hey, we need to add value-added capabilities to the alliance and provide certain common funded services to the NATO nations where it's lacking. Not all of the 32 nations have robust space operations capabilities, but all command structures, militaries, and even governments benefit from space services. So we identified several different areas to apply NATO common funding, and they coalesced around this operations center that is intended to ultimately deliver all of those services, ultimately, because we're still starting out. And that's called the NATO Space Operations Center. Some of those capabilities, and the ones that we've started with, are space situational awareness. These are things like tracking satellites on orbit, building catalogs, understanding the orbital threat environment, not for everything, like U.S. Space Force might track through their space surveillance network, but for a subset of NATO satellites and orbital assets that are of interest to us. Those are the things that we're trying to protect and defend. Those assets that provide critical services to NATO forces here in the Euro-Atlantic theater. So that's space situational awareness. Now, adjacent to that, we have space weather, we have GPS or positioning, navigation, and timing. We're not providing those services. What we're doing is we're monitoring the health, trying to understand the threat environment of how perhaps even the Ukraine war affects the GPS signals and services in Europe. That's one aspect. We also monitor the health of our SATCOM services. So NATO aircraft like the NATO AWACS flying out of Geilenkirchen or the NATO ISR force flying out of Sigonella rely on SATCOM links. We monitor those links along with our excellent partner, NATO Communications and Information Agency, NCIA, who runs the global gateways for the NATO leased SATCOM transponders. So we're looking to make sure that those links are available when our forces need them. And of course, that's a role that we will have through the continuum of the deterrence and defense mission here from pre-Article 5 to post-Article 5. It's just a matter of scale. Several other things. One of our big initiatives that we're very excited about and that we are taking on from our friends and partners at SHAPE J2 is the space-based ISR initiative. This is what I would consider the space layer of the stack of capabilities that NATO and the NATO nations, the alliance nations, bring the full intelligence picture to SACEUR. So space-based ISR is up and running here at NATO AirCom, Allied Persistent Surveillance from Space, or the APSS, as you might have heard it. This is a voluntary contribution from 19 nations spearheaded by Luxembourg. And that starts full operational capability on the 1st of January, 2026, but we're already using the capability. And that would bring remote sensing products and services and fully realized intelligence from 19 nations. We call it TCPED, Tasking, Collection, Processing, Exploitation, and Dissemination. It is a huge capability, and it is provided by the nations to us through Allied Persistent Surveillance from Space. They can even add commercial remote sensing products to that from their national satellites or from leased or purchased services throughout the coalition. Very exciting. So that's what's going on with that. Several other capabilities, but the NSPOC is off and running, and we're trying to focus on those value-added services to the NATO nations and to the alliance structure.
All I can say is, wow, you guys have a huge umbrella of activities and support and operations that you provide here from NATO Space for just space capabilities. So my question is, as I read in my bio for you earlier, you bring this wealth of experience here to NATO. And as you said earlier, not all the nations have these space capabilities. So I can only say that your value added as well, sir.
Oh, thank you.
With having all that knowledge and experience coming here, what would you say are things that have been really beneficial in your past experiences bringing over here to NATO?
I appreciate that question. So my adventures with working with the coalition started when I was assigned to Royal Air Force Menwith Hill on an assignment. It was kind of a joint coalition assignment with the U.S. and the U.K. And that's where I really started working side by side with mission partners on on really just very high-end, often classified missions, but seeing just the way that two nations could cooperate at such a deep level, pushing aside traditional classification barriers, which usually stand as walls that we can't, overcome, but to accomplish so much, that sparked something in me on this journey for working with partners. The core of what we do here, and I think the DNA of what we do here at the NATO Space Operations Center and our large organization, the CIFSPIC, is partnering. The Space Force calls it partnering to win, but partnering flows throughout all of our lines of effort here at the INSPOC. I went from Menwith Hill to a Space Force assignment. And during that time, I deployed to Operation Inherent Resolve, and I worked for the Australian J5. My boss was an Italian colonel, and the guy who sat across the table from me, as far as you are sitting from me now, was a Dutch lieutenant colonel working the plan for Operation Inherent Resolve. This was hugely informative to me and truly an experience that has carried over into this job. Perhaps even more than some of my more space technical positions that I've held in the past. There I learned how 70 nations of that massive coalition that have broad overlap with NATO can work together to burden share, right? In fact, some of those lessons learned are lessons that my S5 here, Lieutenant Colonel Guillermo Martin, came with already. So I was catching up to these folks who've been planning and working as coalition for a long time. But what I realized is there are methods and means through the plan for a coalition to fight together, and it acknowledges the strengths of some and allows others to contribute. Maybe from their strength as well, but maybe not such a massive financial or manpower contribution, right? Nations are of different sizes, economies are of different sizes, militaries of different sizes. That does not diminish in the least the contribution that they're able to make from their nations. And so what we realized here at the NATO Space Operations Center is as we develop plans for SACURE, what we need is a way to bring those capabilities on. So we're working towards a combined joint statement of requirements that is reactive and responsive to the Defense of the Euro-Atlantic family of plans, or the DDA family of plans. And that CJ SOAR in the future, we will work to get there. That's kind of our ultimate goal for our plan shop. But the ultimate goal of that is to kind of say, here's what you need to fight and win to do that deterrence and defense mission of NATO, from beans to bullets to base defense to satellites to remote sensing. It breaks those contributions down so that we can smartly apply resources to SACURE's plans. So that was what I learned when I was deployed with OIR, directly applicable to this. But in my previous job as Director of Space Forces at U.S. Southcom, that's where I learned the value of building the capacity of our partners. Now, security cooperation is not something we do in NATO. Blessedly, we are already an alliance. We have a common vision, a common command structure, common goals. But space is new to so many nations. And I count us in the U.S. among that. I mean, sure, we went to the moon in 1969, but let's be honest. Space really, up until the formation of the Space Force, has largely been looked at as a support activity of other things. Now, we still provide those P&T services and SATCOM services. Those sort of baked into our anti-access area denial, our over-the-horizon capabilities, our precision strike capabilities. Those will always be there. But we realized that the satellites on orbit providing those capabilities were no longer safe. And so they needed to be defended. And that's the new aspect, thinking of space as a joint operating area, just like any other warfighting domain or any other defense and deterrence domain. So as I said, we're new to it too in the U.S. Space Force. 2019 was a big year for NATO and for the globe when it comes to making this pivot for space. That's when that's the year that everything hinges around. 2019 is when the U.S. Spacecom became a combatant command. It's when the U.S. Space Force became a force. It's when the French Air Force became the French Air and Space Force. It's when NATO declared space an operational domain. So we're all kind of waking up to the fact that we have this precious resource that we have depended on and taken for granted for so long. And now the cultures are changing within our militaries. So we here at NATO need to build together. So that lesson learned in Southcom of building our partners so they could join the community and really make contributions and help protect our flanks from our adversaries, that is just as true here in Europe. So I'm very proud of the operation here that we have at the INSPOC. But the thing I'm most proud about is that as we bring in the 16 or so nations that are currently making workforce contributions to our team here, we are training those people on the mission essential tasks of space domain awareness and space-based ISR. We're training them how to do the joint commercial operations. We're training them to be trainers. We have frequent secondments from several nations, Spain, Romania, France, to name a few. And when they send us their operators for 6, 8 weeks, sometimes 3 or 4 months, we send them back with a deeper knowledge of how NATO fights, how NATO command and controls, what our plans are, what our needs are, and they take those back to their ops centers. So my observation is that we are building the ethos and culture of space warfighting here in NATO, and it's not us doing it for them. It's all of us of the 32 doing it together, and it's been a true pleasure.
Thank you for sharing that, sir. I mean, for real, that was one of the best experiences I've had here at AirCom. Was the moment I first went to the NATO Space Operations Center. I'm trying to remember what it was, but I was part of a tour for a group, and I remember turning the corner and then going into the Space Operations Center, and I just see all these different patches, different flags, different colors of uniform, just different cultures. And I remember it was a Canadian gentleman who briefed all of us. I think it was a brief to Landcom.
Okay.
You know, the landies out there who don't look up to see the support they're getting, right?
That's right.
But they wanted to know about space. But I just remember thinking to myself, again, goosebumps, like this was amazing. All the different countries here collaborating together. Like you said, sir, the partnering has been a key focus for you as a leader for the Space Operations Center and just for NATO space as a whole. Now, my question, along the lines of what you were talking about earlier about DDA family of plans and capabilities that can be provided or just given as recommendations to secure, the Space Center is often described as a focal point for space activities within NATO. Can you kind of walk us through, our audience, a typical request that you might see from a NATO commander or a NATO support element or just a NATO operations unit? And can you kind of tell our listeners the benefit that those individuals who requested space capabilities got?
Certainly. So our space domain concept of operations, the North Atlantic Council directed CONOPS that tells SACEUR exactly what he is supposed to deliver to the Alliance for Space really names 3 mission areas: SDA, Space Domain Awareness, which we've already talked a little bit about. Then there's also Operational Space Support. Operational Space Support are the common funded capabilities, services, and effects that we as NATO provide to NATO and provide to NATO nations as those capabilities may be. We've mentioned a couple of those already. So it could be a direct request for support for analysis that is SDA. Yes, we have that. But then it could be a space-based ISR request. Now we have the NATO ISR force, and we're working with those requirements. But that is also, since as a voluntary contribution of the nations, that's also a value-added service that we can provide back to the nations. So that's operational space support, providing common funded services. Then there's operational space coordination. So this is based off of NATO policy that says the nations are the primary force providers and the primary deterrence and defense entities when it comes to space, meaning NATO supports the sovereign action of nations to defend their capabilities on space, provide space forces and effects to their fielded forces, and to NATO in support of the family of plans. Now, that is a bigger activity that we could probably spend entire podcasts talking about.
You're going to come back on the podcast? Is that
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I see what I've done here.
I've already scheduled you.
Yeah, tactical error. But on a typical day and throughout the month, we're in contact with several of the space awareness centers or the space centers of the alliance, to include my own nation, the U.S. And we will share intelligence data, we'll share orbital data, we'll share conjunction data. We have a NATO conjunction, meaning two satellites that are coming into close proximity with one another. Sometimes it's just orbitology, sometimes it's an accident, sometimes it's very much on purpose. When we suspect it's on purpose, that's when intel and space domain awareness come together to start making meaning out of what's happening in the orbital JOA. So commanders can make decisions about how to react, how to adjust their operations, how to switch to other means if it's a guaranteed collection, maybe how to change their comm channels depending upon what sort of interaction the two spacecraft are having in the orbital joint operating area. There's also a system called REACT, which is a GPS or a positioning, navigation, and timing modeling software that was developed in-house by NATO. And what we use that system for is to help commanders understand what the jamming environment is on all their P&T systems. So it can help them determine what sort of flight paths to fly, what sort of weaponeering. Are they going to use a GPS tail kit? Are they going to use some other method to do their targeting? With what level of assurance can they assure a strike? There's several reasons to use these capabilities, but we'll get those requests throughout the day, throughout the month, and we will do our analysis and provide those products directly to the requester. One capability that I'm particularly proud of that was responsive, you may recall in the news, the Baltic Sea cable cut. So that obviously caused a flurry of interest and activity among the nations, among the Baltic nations and the NATO HQ. So NATO was broadly looking for monitoring solutions to help understand that problem, understand the not only the threat environment, what the potential impacts were, but also what actors were responsible for conducting that cable cut. Could we say it was on purpose? Could we say it was an accident? So NATO has several options when it comes to that. But what we did was apply a very low cost option, TAC SRT, the system that I mentioned, and with partnership from Space Forces Europe, the U.S. space component that sits across the base. We devised a collection requirement and took it to industry, and industry analyzed the entire project, not only showing the critical undersea cabling nodes and showing all of those links, but also doing a historical review of all of the ships active during the time of the cable cut, and then even analyzing down to what sort of suspicious activity were those ships eliciting. Who owns the ships? Where are they flagged out of? Where did they sail? Where were they going? Are they scientific ships? Is there a good explanation for why they're camped out over a cluster of cables for an extended period of time? So we were able to quickly turn that product with the agility that we get from our commercial partners and put that in the hands of NATO S2, who can then go and do deeper analysis with national systems. So that was a huge win for us, and it is turning into a longer term effort. So our adversaries, even though they try and obfuscate their actions, we have great commercial partners. We have a deep bench of capabilities, and we're going to use every single one of them to ensure freedom of action for the alliance and just freedom in general for the nations of Europe.
I really appreciate that tangible example, sir. I'm a simple man by nature, so I needed something to visualize in applying these space capabilities. And that example just hit home for that recent use example. Now, kind of going to that subject about your commercial partnerships, and industry's involvement in space. What record advances in commercial space from satellite mega constellations to private space launch? How is NATO planning to integrate or collaborate further with industry? It already sounds like you're doing it and doing it really well. Going into the future, how do you see that growing?
So several ways, and cut me off when this gets too long or too boring. I'll try and keep it concise. This year, NATO has published and is in trial structure of their commercial space strategy. So this is NATO's holistic approach to bringing space products and services to the NATO command structure and to NATO nations alike. So we have a hand in this. And of course, just because we have space in our name doesn't mean we're the only user. We want to see the most broad adoption of cost-effective space data and space products going everywhere it needs to go, to the JFC commanders, to the Situation Center up at NATO HQ, straight to the desks of decision makers. We really just want to facilitate putting the data into our smart systems, into our decision systems, and not stand in the way of that. Then our prerogative is we want to be able to protect it. So we occupy the role of the commercial integration cell under this strategy. It's a new role and responsibility that we've taken on in the last year here at the Combined Force Space Component Command. And as integrator, our prerogative is to not necessarily identify the commercial companies. The NATO space front door will do that. That will be the single entry point for space providers to say, hey, we have capabilities. We want to work with NATO, and it's a vetting process to ensure that these companies have the financials and are able to provide what they say they can provide, and don't have any unnecessary entanglements with our adversaries. That's very important. We want trusted partners. But once they're through that front door, they are able to find the specific projects and partners within the NATO structure that they can partner with, right? And we within NATO can find those commercial partners that will help us realize our vision, realize the mission. So as commercial integrator, our responsibility is to not only write plans for NATO, but find the best solutions from commercial that have been vetted through that front door to execute Sakir's vision and execute his plans in the most cost-effective, timely manner, with maximal mission assurance possible.
Yes, sir. That's definitely not boring answer, because I can neither confirm nor deny it, but maybe Elon Musk is a listener to the Ally Air Power podcast and is very keenly interested in industry support of just what's going on. But actually, going along that thread, right, of looking into the future, especially as her commercial industry becomes more prominent up there in space. The Space Center here, the Space Operations Center, is relatively young, established in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see it 5 years from now? How do you want it to grow your tenure here at NATO AirCom?
So forgive me if the construction outside is coming into the podcast. Progress is the sound of progress around us. So you're right. We are definitely building the CIFSPIC. Every day we grow. Every day we get a little bit more capable. I think I've explained the mandate and how vast it is. When you compare that to the actual size and our numbers, you could tell we have a long way to go and a long way to grow. So currently, we are building with a focus on getting our 24-hour watch capability up and running in the next 2 years. Right now, we're on a 12 by 5. Largely based on we're waiting the delivery of our mission system, which starts in October of this year. Very excited about that. NATO, but also because it takes a while to grow the cadre. So NATO started down this path, as I explained when in my opening remarks, focused on providing value-added services with the focus on space domain awareness. Well, after 2023 and in the wake of the Ukraine war, a global pandemic, there has been an awakening and a renaissance within the NATO command structure and the nations and our desire to do more. Out of that, the Combined Force Space component was born. So if I was to look to 2030, we are on a NATO-wide campaign plan. In fact, I'm proud to say my S5 has presented the first draft of this campaign plan today. And what that's trying to do is NATO has come out in force to support and build this domain. We've been on an implementation plan for the past 5 years. We're about to transition from phase 3 to phase 4. Phase 4 will be heavily focused on command and control and delivering mission systems. In addition to that, NATO has put the common funding where their mouth is, right? So they've shown up with the funding, and we start our capability program plan in October. It's a 732 million euro project that will provide mission systems, data, contract support, contractors on the floor with us, and additional personnel to help integrate all of this capability. So really world-class, commercially focused space domain awareness and space-based ISR services. Very excited. It will be a meaningful contribution to NATO warfighting. And if that's all we did, it would be a massive step forward and a massive force multiplier. But there's so much more to do. The nations are day by day becoming more and more capable, and several are very capable when it comes to the protect and defend mission on orbit, being able to provide true lethality from space in multi-domain. A couple of countries, to name a few: France, Germany, the UK, Canada, the US, already have a coalition called Operation Olympic Defender. We are working together with that coalition to bring those effects into NATO plans. So we'll be in lockstep with them, and our partners across the base at Space 4 Europe have been very helpful in that mission. So we're excited to partner with them. What we are building here is, and what I see by 2030 is, we will have established the force structure, meaning the offices, the command relationships, the doctrine, the processes necessary that when NATO wants to grow and to command and control space forces and effects, they have the credible staff to do it. It'll look something maybe smaller. It'll look something like Allied Aircom, although we're not. That's not our mandate yet. Don't mistake me. Nobody has asked for Allied Spacecom, but we have asked for a credible command and control organization. And being joint doctrine expert yourself, that has meaning, and that means a staff that can write plans, a staff that can write orders, that can do target development, all these things that we take for granted in our very established Aircom, Marcom, and Landcom space. The CIFSPIC is going to catch up, and we have a great partner in Allied Aircom to get there.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
For your time, for really educating our listeners and just people around the world about what we're doing here. It's just clear that NATO is committed to space, looking into the future, by everything that you've described. Now, sir, I have to ask a very serious question right now. It's a very serious one. It might get into OPSEC, but I have to ask it. As a Trekkie, I have noticed a lot of Star Wars decor and merchandise just littering the area, and this certainly must be unnecessary paraphernalia going around or distraction? I have to ask, what is it with this Star Wars obsession in the Space Center? Because it's just everywhere.
I've lost all control. It has turned into Comic-Con in the Space Center. So we'll see. I love having the when you have people that are excited to come to work, that have a passion about what they do, it spills over into obviously the decor, but also the conversations, the jokes, you name it. I think we're probably fairly evenly split between Star Trek and Star Wars. Surprisingly, lightly represented with Battlestar Galactica.
I'll allow that. I will allow that. That's good. Well, no, thank you, sir. Let's sum up this conversation. It's been such a great conversation. And seriously, sir, we'd love to have you on the podcast again to just talk about where we're going with the NATO Space Operations Center. But my last question, seriously, is what message would you like to leave with NATO personnel across this 32-member alliance to the wider public about the importance of space to our collective security?
I'd like to start first with a thank you to the nations and their representatives, the senior national reps here at Allied Aircom. There has been a concerted push over the last year to fill our flagged positions here, and they are sending their best. We're getting competent and motivated staff officers, and it's improving what we do. Even though our staff is small, we've got some heavy hitters that are filling in the gaps. Send more, but we really appreciate what you've done. But if I had I think a more broad message, it's this: the investments that NATO has made in space are right and necessary. The work is not done by any stretch of the imagination, but we're doing it because what happens in the orbital joint operating area has serious consequences and ripples that are felt in every other domain, terrestrial, cyber. So it is a harbinger of what will happen in other areas of warfare, what happens in space.
Thank you, sir, Colonel Whitaker. Thank you for being on the Allied Air Power podcast. This was extremely beneficial, not just for the listeners, but for me. This was very, very interesting. Thank you, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me anytime. And next time I'll get some of these, my guardians in crime over here, my partners. So appreciate this opportunity, and it's been a lot of fun. Thank you.
That wraps up this flight of the Allied Air Power podcast, where news-driven updates meet the authentic voices behind the mission to defend every inch of NATO territory. Today, we spoke with Colonel Whitaker, who gave us an inside look at NATO Space Center here at Ramstein. We learned why it was created, how it serves as a hub for space support across the alliance, and the very real ways space products like imagery, navigation, and secure communications enable NATO commanders in the field. Colonel Whitaker reminded us that space is no longer a benign environment, but one crowded with competitors and vulnerabilities. NATO is responding with cooperation, resilience, and vision, bringing together allies, industry, and experts to ensure space remains secure, accessible, and supportive of operations across all domains. His message was clear. Space is not about astronauts or satellites. It is about the security of every NATO citizen on the ground, in the air, at sea, and in cyberspace. Now, if you found value in today's episode, which I know you did, share the show and leave us a rating so others can navigate air, space, and cyberspace with us. Explore deeper coverage anytime at ac.nato.int and send us your questions or topics you'd like us to tackle. If you want to be on the show, shoot us a message. Until our next sortie, stand ready in the air, secure in cyberspace, and steady on the path to the stars.